Hi, welcome to our section on negative space. Negative space is one of the more vague rules of composition, and it's often just the result of applying the rule of thirds or other compositional rules, so it's easily overlooked. But with a little exploration of the subject, you'll see just what it is and how it applies to composition. There are a couple ways of looking at negative space. The first way is simply just as the part of the photo not occupied by the subject. The areas in black are the negative space, and the white areas are your subject, or positive space. Notice here how the larger amount of negative space in the front of the geese emphasizes their direction and motion. This is also a good implementation of the rule of thirds, as the geese occupy the lower right corner of the frame. You can really see in these examples how other compositional elements come into play. Here, proper use of the rule of thirds leads to the proper implementation of look space. The empty third of the frame on the left gives a sense of direction to her gaze. Without that space in front of her, there's a real cramped feeling. In this example, too much headroom and framing the subjects too far to the left creates large amounts of negative space that don't have any relevance to the photo and distract from the subject matter. Too little negative space, and again you get that cramped feeling. Proper use of negative space gives a nice balance and focuses your eye on the subjects. The rules of headroom and filling the frame here are essentially the same as negative space. So as I've said, the proper use of other compositional rules makes for good use of negative space. So you needn't place too much thought on this when you're trying to apply this theory. But it is a good way of looking at how all the other elements of composition can come together. There is, however, another practical way of using negative space. In a photo, when you have two subjects or objects that are strongly related to one another, it's often very important to leave just enough space in between them so that they don't overlap, or so that they're not too far apart. In this example, the underground sign in the foreground is slightly separated from Big Ben in the background. The effect is subtle, but it does create depth. Without that small amount of space, as seen here, that depth is lost. So take a look at these two similar photos and notice the difference that that tiny amount of separation makes to the perception of depth in this photo. A small amount of space like this can also create a sense of tension or movement. A great example of this is in Michelangelo's painting on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. The next time you see a picture of this, notice how the fingertips of God's hand are just slightly separated from Adam's fingertips. This creates a sense of movement and tension and implies that something really important is just about to happen. It's a really effective use of negative space. So it can be pretty easy to forget about this when you're looking through a viewfinder, but because negative space can really bring together so many other compositional elements, I highly recommend giving it a bit more thought the next time you're out shooting.